Hey there, honey bunnies. Welcome to episode 100 and something. Sorry. Usually, before I start recording, I look up the last episode number because I never remember. And so I can sound like I know what I'm doing. But this is Laura Michelle Wolff, your host of Sovereign Storytellers. And I met with a lovely person on Friday. I don't know if she wants her name public, so I won't say who she was, but she's a longtime follower of the podcast from the very beginning, back where it was called Addicted Mystics. And I ended up changing the name because although I do think we can get addicted to mysticism, and I think a lot of people who are, end up on a spiritual journey have some aspect of addictions. Either they were raised in addictions or they've struggled with their own addiction. And I was an addiction therapist, a mental health and trauma therapist that has worked with addictions and have my own background of all of that. However, I don't do that work anymore. And so when the podcast was called Addicted Mystics, I got an enormous flood all the time from rehab centers for people who are actively looking for help or working with that population. And so I had to change the name because it was giving the wrong impression. And the reason I bring up the name change is, first of all, if you've been following and listening since Addicted Mystic days, because I think only 7 episodes in, I changed the name. That was a while ago, and like a long while ago. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for still being here. Thank you for listening to whatever I happen to be ranting about. And if I've never met you and I never meet you in any form, I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. While I was talking with this person, she had bought a reading and we were exploring things, and at the end she'd asked me about my name change. So all these years, all my life really, I've gone by my middle name, which is Michelle. So all my online stuff is Michelle Wolff, thatmichellewolff.com. Like all my social media has been Michelle Wolff since, well, whenever I got online, but all my life. So Laura is my middle name. And some people will say, well, what's your real name? Well, they're all my real name. My birth certificate says Laura Michelle Carter. Carter is my dad's name, of course. And in 1992, was it sooner than that? 92 or 93. I was in college. I went to college late in life. Relatively speaking, I was in my late 20s. And I was getting divorced. And I was frustrated. So this whole episode is going to be about name changes and how we identify ourselves and how important it is. So in 92 or 3, as I was getting divorced and looking at having to change my name again, I got frustrated. And I was like, you know what? What happens if I get remarried someday and I take that guy's last name and something happens to him, and then I'm back to not, I've got my dad's name, then my husband's name, now my ex-husband's name. If I remarry, I'll have another name. And I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I don't even want to deal with this. I want my own name. So Wolff is my last name I chose myself. It is, ironically enough, the German spelling of that name. The English spelling is Wolfe. And then I don't know, the animal's WOLF. And I picked the double F. I looked at all the different spellings. I didn't know at the time it was German. And I was wanting to get away from my German heritage. This is why, wherever you go, there you are. You can't escape yourself. I ended up picking the German spelling without even knowing it. Isn't that funny? So I have already picked a name that was not on my birth certificate and not in my family records. In theory, it could be a family name somewhere back there. I can trace my family back to this forest that I can't pronounce in German Hungary area. Anyway, so I legally changed it, and in those days it wasn't as hard as it is these days to change your name. So I just had to publish it in the paper, do a bunch of stuff, and that's my legal name. So my driver's license and my passport and everything legal has Wolff on it. Well, because I'd already done that before I started making a name for myself online, it didn't matter. And growing up, it's not that unusual, I think, in the South for people to go by their first initial and middle name or just their middle name. So, F. Scott Fitzgerald, or there's lots of people with although I don't know if he's from the South, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not that uncommon for kids to go by their middle name. And I had always been called Michelle and not Laura. And in fact, when people would try to give me a nickname, or my sister, my dad wouldn't allow it. He was like, we picked those names for a reason. My dad's side of the family would want to call me Mickey, which is a nickname for Michelle, and he just wouldn't have it. So we were never allowed to be called by nicknames. And I never really questioned why it was my middle name. When I got older, and by older I mean about 6 years old, maybe 7, whenever somebody would bring the name Laura up, my mother would begin complaining about how she hated the name Laura because she thought it was the name of someone my father was cheating on her with when I was born, around the time I was born, because he picked Laura, she picked Michelle for the Beatles song, of course, which was, I was born in 1966. So whenever I heard the word Laura, I experienced her anger about it, her bitterness, her resentment. And I attached that, and then I hated my first name. But as a child, you don't question why you hate it. You just take on the beliefs of the people you're raised with. This is how racism is carried on. This is how religions are carried on. Things that you eat, like every aspect of you is influenced by the person you're raised by, people you're raised by, the culture you grow up in. And if you never get to the point in life where you question that, you're just a parrot, parroting things that you heard. So a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, I really started dedicating my energy to undoing all the poverty beliefs and things about money. There's several episodes about money that you can listen to. The unraveling of, why do I think this about money? Why do I struggle? Why have I always struggled? Why does my mom's side and my dad's side have such a difficult relationship with money? My dad's side suffered more. They were sharecroppers. They never got to go to school for very long. I think my dad got to go the longest, and they made him leave in 5th grade. But my dad's family started picking whatever crop was out in the fields when they were old enough to drag a bag behind them. So I'm talking 2 or 3 years old. They would get up. The oldest daughter, my Aunt Irene, who was also a child, would make breakfast for everyone. She had to drag a chair over to the stove. She was that little. And then all those kids and whatever adults were around would head to the fields and pick all day and then come back. And then when the money came in, it was spent on alcohol and partying and then cigarettes and things like that. And then it would be gone. And so feast, famine, terrible poverty, abject poverty. So I started digging into all that. And I had to undo my beliefs about people who have a lot of money, which I'm glad I did that a few years ago. Or right now, the class war that we're in would probably be eating me alive. Like, I'm angry about what's happening. I'm angry about the coup in my country. I'm angry about what's going on, people losing their jobs, and I'm not even going to list all the things. But I'm angry in a different way than I think I would have been a few years ago, because it is the billionaire class gutting everything to give themselves yet another tax break, taking away from those who have very little to give to those who don't want for anything and never will. So much money they couldn't spend it in 17 lifetimes they couldn't spend it all. And they still want more and more and more. And if I hadn't done all that work, I think I'd be impossible to live with. Because I know it's not about the money at all. It's not at all about the money. So I don't get hung up on that. However, the reason when I was digging into all those beliefs, I was like, I was using an alter ego. So I was like, okay, I need an alter ego because I have no idea what it's like to have more than enough money. I can barely sustain myself, and it's always been like that, subsistence level. I have just enough, and often quite a bit of debt. So I was reading The Alter Ego by Todd Herman. I was run across this idea of having a wealthy self, alter ego. So I was playing with all that stuff, and I was meditating, and I was like, you know what? It's interesting that I have a first name that I've never used because I hate it. And when people at doctor's offices would say it, before computers came along, you weren't forced to go by any order in your name. You could just list your name. But then we got computers and everything had to be entered as first, middle, initial, last name. And so I remember being really upset about that because I was forced to list myself as Laura M. At the time, Carter or Fletcher. I think I was married already by the time the computer things came along and forced us to start going by names in a certain order. So anyway, I'm doing all that. And I remember I used to get enraged and I would say, I don't use my first name. I go by my middle name, which in the South is no big deal. They're like, oh yeah, what is it? And they make a note on the chart. Try to remember to call you that. So a few years ago, when I was looking into this, I was like, wait, I've never used my name. I have a name that's sort of untouched. And I bet y'all can hear Juniper Hoot playing in the background. He's got a little cloth mouse that he runs around and makes a lot of noise with in the evenings. So I was like, why don't I use that first name and make like my wealthy self's name be like Luxury Laura? It felt ridiculous. And then I was like, wait, I can't do that until I figure out why I hate that name so much. And then on reflection, I was like, wait a minute, I never hated that name. My mother hated that name. And every time it came up, it was such a blast of anger and bitterness and resentment and all this stuff. I just associated that with that name. I had no reason to hate that name at all. Like, that's my first name. So I was like, this is crazy. This is how embedded that stuff is. That I just literally would have a visceral hate for that name. But that's how we're conditioned. So if you're into human design, that's the deconditioning process. How come I don't like this? How come I hate that? Why do I think this about those people? How come my attitude is Why do I curl my lip? Why do I have contempt? How come I really love this food and really hate that food? Like really digging into all of that, which I had done a lot of, but not with my name. So for me, being online since 2015 in a big way, and all of my social media accounts and my website and everything has Michelle Wolff on it, and like my acuity scheduling, I can't change that. I'd have to start a new account. But I really wanted all of me. Once I realized what had happened, I was like, I've got a fresh name that doesn't have any pain associated with it that's mine. Once I stripped away what wasn't mine, I was like, oh gosh, I actually really like that name. And at the time I was going through this, I was substitute teaching in a Title I school that was mostly Hispanic children. And because of the way the system is set up, my substitute teaching name tag, had Laura on it. So they were calling me Laura. And I was like, wow, I love how that sounds. I love hearing them say Laura. And the kids were from all over the place, south of us: Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, like all over the place. And I was like, gosh, that sounds really great. I love it. So I didn't change it. And I really wrestled with changing it online because it creates confusion, and it has created confusion. So, but it felt so important to me to have all of me present. And it's not like I was hiding. I definitely wasn't. Y'all know, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you definitely hear all the things and then some. Like, I hold very little back. So I wanted to continue that. So when I'm meeting new people, they're addressing me by Laura or Laura Michelle. And then I was like, well, I really like Laura Michelle. And also, it's a double name. Is that pretentious? Is that Hollywoodish? Is that silly? And I was like, well, no, not really, because I have a younger cousin who's also named Laura Michelle, and her whole life she's been Laura Michelle, a double name. So again, that's like a thing in the South, a double name. Betty Lou, Robin Lynn, whatever. The double names are Betty Sue. That's the old one, but there are a lot of double names. I really like how it sounds, and also I don't really care what people call me. I like the sound of both names. But most people still at this point know me as Michelle, and I still like that name. So I'm fine with people calling me Michelle. That's what's familiar to them. That's how they know me. That's the identity piece, right? So new people coming in, I list everything as Laura Michelle. Some people call me Laura Michelle, and some people call me Laura. And I'm okay with all of that too. It's like we don't have just one identity. The identities that we know each other as are constructs. They're constructed by our projections, by what people tell us. But no matter how close you are with someone, you'll never know them inside and out 100%, because that's not the nature of humanity. We are one on some level, and we are very separate from each other while we're physical. And even the things we think we know about people are often, they're colored with our lenses. They're colored with, let me give you an example. There's some people that do things that don't bother me at all. But if somebody else does them, I get really upset about it. Like the people I like and love sort of get a pass for doing annoying things. I don't even notice it. And if I do, I'm just like, whatever, I'll just ignore it. But somebody else can do the same behavior, and if I don't like them, this is so petty. If I don't like them or I don't know them, then it can be super annoying to me. And which is interesting. It's like, I've decided that this person can have a pass, but this person is going to catch the wrath, right? It's ridiculous. So when we really look at identities, they're constructed. They're constructed for us from birth on. Excuse me for yawning. And then ideally, we reach a stage in our development where we start to question what's been constructed for us. And we start to ask ourselves, wait, I got handed a playbook. I got handed a character sketch. And I've been living that character and following the playbook my entire life. Now, wait a minute. Which of these do I want to keep? Which of these do I want to get rid of? And what can I be that I haven't even considered? So a great way to do this is, and I did this, and I have a video about it somewhere. It's mind mapping out on a piece of paper. It's radical acceptance. It's listing on a piece of paper your name in a circle, and then you draw spokes out from this circle with your name in it, and you write every positive and negative thing about yourself that you can think of, even the things you would just die if somebody else found out. How petty you can be, or how mean you can be, or how cold-hearted you can be. And you write it all down so you can see it on a single piece of paper, so that you can recognize that you're not just one thing and you're not just a handful of things. You're like 50 to 100 things. I encourage people to write as many lines around that circle and label every line, as many as they can. I drew mine on a giant piece of poster board, and I wrote everything. Bitchy, generous, gossipy, helpful, animal rescuer, like all the things I'm proud of and all the things I'm not proud of. And then I traced those back. Who taught me social services? Well, my aunts. My aunts were interpreters for the deaf. We went to church. My aunts interpreted. We got taken to festivals for the deaf. Both my aunts were foster parents. They were very much involved in social service. So for a long time, I thought that's why I ended up in social service and advocacy stuff, because I was raised by them. But the more I learned about astrology, I was like, oh, there was no way I wasn't going to be an advocate for something. And then when I learned about human design, I was like, oh, God, I couldn't have avoided social work if I tried. Like, I was never, ever going to be a computer programmer, which I did try, because I was like, whoa, those guys are making a lot of money and their job doesn't look that hard, but it actually is that hard. I do website stuff, and I can do a little bit of coding, but it's way beyond me. And it's not, I mean, I can build a website, but that's not me, right? I'm a social worker at heart. So all these pieces of identity, and names are very important. Most recently, there is a bill that has passed the House that would mean that you can't register to vote unless you have a U.S. passport. Because to get a U.S. passport, you have to supply evidence or supportive paperwork for all your name changes. So if you've changed your name to get married, but you haven't gone through the rigorous nonsense of getting a passport, you won't be able to register to vote, and you won't be able to vote. That's what they're trying to do. Not everyone can afford to get a passport. Not everyone has, some people have legal histories that won't allow them to get a passport. They will not be allowed to vote. So they're messing with people, and it hasn't passed the Senate yet, but we don't know. Maybe it won't go anywhere because it's pretty ridiculous. And you're cutting out, not only people who've changed their name because they're trans or because they're in hiding from violence, but because they got married. Some people get married these days and both people change their name. So it's going to impact men as well. Not to the same degree. But there you go. So our names matter a lot. Our names matter in how we think about ourselves, but names also carry energy. If a name is strongly associated in a family, like you have a whole bunch of Michaels, Michael Sr., Michael Jr., Michael Jr. the second, Michael the fourth, or whatever, like the name carries energy. Words carry energy. We know this. Our speech has frequency. So names have frequency, and it matters what we call ourselves. It matters how we think about our name, what our name says to us about us. If you're in the Kennedys, having the last name Kennedy comes with a package of stuff, right? If you're in a long family lineage, in certain parts of Mississippi, my last name Carter comes with a package of stuff attached. And if people know who my dad was, it opens doors for me. Not doors that I'm interested in, not doors that I would ever walk through, but knowing, oh, that's that guy's daughter, she's okay, or let her in, or whatever. You see how that name and identity stuff is connected. When he died and I had to make a few phone calls to his friends, a lot of people were like, oh, he meant this to me, he meant that to me. You ever need anything, you let me know. Don't keep my number. I don't care if it's 20 years from now. You need something, you let me know because you're his daughter. Names are important. I worry about people who don't feel like they can call themselves something different, because people do make a fuss about it. People don't like it when you change your name because I'll say some people, not everybody, but it creates a ripple in the brain because you have to readjust your idea of a person, your image of them, how you think about them. It's interesting that we make such a fuss about it, but we don't make a fuss about it when women get married and they change their last name. We don't make a fuss about that. They're like, oh, I've always called you Carter. Now I got to call you Fletcher. Oh, that's right. You got married. Michelle Fletcher instead of Michelle Carter. And oh, you've changed your name. Oh, now it's Michelle Wolff. And people just train themselves to call you by your new last name. But when you change your first name, or you have the audacity to pick a name, that is like beyond the pale. It's so funny when people are, well, it's not funny at all, but when trans people want to be called by a new name, and people make such a stink about it, and like, oh my God, I can't remember. I'm sorry I keep calling you Trey when you want to be called Teresa. I just can't remember. I can't believe you changed your name. I just can't remember to call you that. I'm just going to call you Trey. And it's like, well, that's not true. Because we can remember to call married women by their new last name. It might take us a few times, but we don't make a stink about it. We make an effort, and we don't continue to call them by their maiden name. So we are very conditioned. This type of name change is okay. This type of name change is medium. And this type of name change, well, now you're just a freak. Now you're just a weirdo. Like the people who changed their names to, like, in the 60s, I don't know if it's as popular now, but I know a lot of kids got named like Summer Rain and, Oak Leaf and things like that. Nature names, or names that are not, air quote, normal or average. And people have very different responses to them. So the way we respond to someone changing their name lets us know how important identity is, and it lets us know how hard it is to change your identity. When you've always been the poor one in the family and you want to now become wealthy and work on a wealthy identity, people around you don't like it. When you've never had boundaries and now you want to be known as someone who has boundaries, people don't like it. They'll actively try to prevent you from changing. Even this happens in weight loss. Somebody in the family's always been the fat one. You start to lose weight, or the friend group. This happened to me when I lost weight. I had one friend who criticized me constantly, called me a bitch even. Like, oh, you just want to be a skinny bitch. Like, well, actually, I'd like to live longer and feel better in my body, but okay, if that's what you have to frame it as. You know what I mean? So I wanted to tell you about the name change so that it makes sense. I don't think I've changed it on the podcast yet. I'm not sure if I even can, but I know I haven't changed the graphic, and I can't change it on my scheduler, is I don't want to, like, when you guys go to book a reading, it's michellewolff.as.me/clarity or /celestial or whatever it is. I can't change that. I don't want to change that because I'm on like a really good plan with Acuity. And as they've raised their rates over the years, I've been grandfathered in at the same rate. So I don't want to change it. So I may just have to put a disclaimer like, if you're looking for Laura Michelle, you're in the right place. If you're looking for Michelle, you're also in the right place. So take a notice, like, do you like your name? If you could change your name, would you? Do you have a nickname, and do you like that nickname? I've been given nicknames that I didn't like. And they were projections, like, oh, you're this, so I'm going to call you this nickname forever. But I wasn't that. That was a projection that they were seeing. It had nothing to do with me. And at the time, and lots of times, I just don't care enough about it to be like, hey, yeah, don't call me that. Or, no, my name's Laura Michelle. No, you can't call me Laura. No, you can't call me Michelle. I just really ultimately don't care that much. I care what I know myself as. That's what matters to me. So it's kind of like, I mean it when I say, call me what feels comfortable to you. If you've always known me as Michelle, call me Michelle. If you just met me and you feel weird saying Laura Michelle, which is 4 syllables, then just call me Laura. Like, make yourself comfortable. I'm going to answer to it all. Now, for about, I think I did this, a year ago maybe? I don't know if it's even been a year ago. But people at work would call me Laura, and I would be like, oh yeah, that's me. So it was more of a healing journey for me, more of a, human design talks about deconditioning. I don't know if I finished that thought earlier, but the deconditioning process takes us back to who we were without all the stories attached. That's why this podcast is called Sovereign Storyteller. It matters to me more than anything that everyone be sovereign in their stories. But to be sovereign in your stories, the stories you tell about you and the stories you let other people tell about you, takes a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of being willing to look at your own shadow. It takes being able to look at yourself and go, man, I really love this part of me. And wow, that part of me is pretty bitchy or mean. Like, oh, I can see there's a part of me that would really like to go down revenge road on that. I won't do it, but I have to acknowledge there's a part of me that would like to. We have that devil and angel part of us, and we need to have them both. And so the name thing was sort of me deconditioning and owning all of me. But it's important to me. That's what matters most to me. And it did rattle some people, and I knew they would get past it. It was just like, you expect it to be sunny outside and you go outside and it's snowing and you're like, whoa, what? Wait, what? And you just adjust. It's not that big a deal. So I will probably change the graphic, but I wanted to leave an episode about it because in talking with this delightful person, I realized I hadn't done that. I had thought about doing it, and I think I may have referenced it, but I never actually did it. Okay, so I'm going to leave this. I'm using a new microphone. We're going to hope that I've been talking for nearly 35 minutes, and we're going to hope that this microphone comes out good because I hate post-production editing. That's why y'all get background noise and yawning sounds and the cat meowing, is because I'm just too lazy to hire a sound editor. It's not even about the expense, because I have a guy who will do some editing. And if this sounds like absolutely atrocious, I will send it off to Mark. He's at Number 3 Productions. If you ever want his name, let me know. He does a great job. I will send it to him if this is horrible. I hope it's not, though, because just to let you know, if you're a sound person or you like to live stream, what I'm talking to you on today is Rode, Rode, their new wireless micro, which is absolutely adorable. It's literally about the size of my thumb, and it has a tiny little windscreen on it. It's got amazing range. Like, I could put it on my shirt and go to the other end of my house and talk to you, and it would still connect. I don't like to wear it on my shirt, though, because then you hear a lot of breath sounds. I tried it out yesterday. So anyway, it's completely irrelevant. All right, so that's the story of the name change. I'd love for you to reflect on your name. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Would you ever change it? Have you changed it? If you have changed it, wherever you're listening to this, I'd love to hear a comment as to why you changed it and how that affected you after you changed it. Okay, one more thing I totally forgot about. My mom changed her name a lot. And so growing up with that, I was aware of people who would criticize her for that, but it also kind of normalized it. So when I was a kid, I had named myself Misty. So people who knew me from middle school and high school knew me as Misty, because I had changed my name and I insisted on everyone calling that. And because my mom was an activist for name changes, she made the school list me that way. And like I said, but this was before computers, so you could kind of do what you wanted. I don't think you could get away with that these days. Anyway, what's up with your name? I'd love to hear about it. And until we talk again, think less, feel more, and I will talk to you later.